was a girl, cannot make it any more obvious. He was a punk, she did ballet. What more can I say? He wanted her, she never tell.
Man, I should make myself an opening jingle. How about this? Yeah, how about that? It's my fucking high school thrash metal band. The other day, I just rediscovered our demo. And, it's not actually that bad. Moving on.
Reviews are helpful in that they are social and encourage people to talk about games, and can offer viewpoints or angles of games that we wouldn't consider ourselves.
That's very true. And that's why a lot of people go to a lot of different kinds of reviewers. I personally have a few different critics that I like to go to. I usually like watching Angry Joe talk about games, and I also like to look at people like Yahtzee Croshaw, who just rips everything apart. This has nothing to do with the video itself, but I've just found that generally positive reviews don't really give you a lot of information about the game, whereas a negative review will give you all the things that you need to look out for, technical problems, frame rate issues, gameplay design, things like that. But yes, a review will have you look at the game in a different light, because a lot of people don't really have that critical eye to things. And that's also why critic reviews and user reviews will be separated into their own scores on pretty much every website.
They also encourage people to take a critical look at games and to understand them with a level of depth. However, the idea of user reviews bombing is a completely different dimension of media reviews.
That's not review bombing. Those are two 10 out of 10s. Who edited this?
Something that is much less straightforward than simply evaluating the perceived merits of a piece of media.
That's another 10 out of... come on, guys, really? You couldn't show us an example of a review bomb?
User reviews bombing is what happens when a reviews page for any media receives a noticeable number of negative reviews.
Full stop. Full stop. That is not actually what review bombing is. A lot of people giving a game negative reviews because of a flaw, that's not review bombing. That's just a game getting bad reviews. It's very important that we make the differentiation there. And also, let's look at these reviews that you're showing on screen right now as an example of review bombing. I can't recommend this game for two reasons: the lack of consistency, the potential this game had. What's wrong about that? Picked this game up because it looked really interesting and it was on sale. I'd really like to be able to modify my controls. The upside of the one-hit kill on everything is it can make the boss fight seem interesting. On the other hand, having to watch the boss teabag me for a few seconds every time I died, then having to make my way back to the boss fight and rinse and repeat until I manage to figure out how to kill them doesn't feel satisfying. No option to change keybinds. Game recommends you use a gamepad. It's actually required, as the keyboard won't let you aim properly. These sound like really legitimate criticisms of a game. I don't even know what game they're talking about because you didn't show it in the video. But this is not review bombing. This is people criticizing aspects of the game that should be criticized.
Directly in response to some perceived flaw. First, when something like a game receives a flood of negative reviews, it is a type of action, done in response to any aspect of a game that is seen by enough people to be loathsome.
Yes, you're describing reviews.
This negative item that people are reacting to could be DLC practices, a story or character decision, a response to perceived lack of competent functionality in a game if a game is too buggy to play, for example, just to name a few.
Or maybe the inability to rebind controls? Perhaps would be something that people criticize on the website called Steam.com, but...
While review flooding of any sort can be coordinated, it's not a necessary characteristic of user review bombing.
Well, yeah, usually people don't say to everyone else on the planet, hey, let's go review bomb this site. It's more so that a developer will do something shady or something shitty will happen in the industry, and people on their own volition want to go make their voices heard. So they go to user reviews, like on Steam and Metacritic, where people will hear their voices, and then maybe someone who doesn't know anything about the game will go to those pages to learn more and see the evidence of what happened there, and why players don't want other players to support the devs and the practices involved in the game. I'm not endorsing or condemning review bombing in this video. I'm simply trying to correct what they're putting out as review bombing and what's moral and not moral, because you can tell in this video there's a very obvious bias here. Review bombing is a very complicated thing because the industry is a very complicated thing. There are situations where review bombing has absolutely been warranted, and there's other situations where it hasn't been. There have even been situations where review bombing led to great positive change. Arkham Knight is one that I'd like to think about. That game was released completely broken on PC, absolutely unacceptable, and the companies involved, they totally knew about this. There's no way they didn't know about this. But people complained, the game was review bombed, and it was review bombed so harshly that it was pulled from Steam, patched up, put back on the store, and it now is back on Steam, fully functional, with great reviews. And that's another thing to take into account. This game was ripped apart in the user scores on launch day, and now it's mostly positive. Same game, same set of reviews, but it made a comeback. 94% of the recent reviews have been positive. The review bomb didn't permanently damage the game's user score. Let's keep that in mind going forward. And it feels weird calling Arkham Knight a review bomb. I don't even think Arkham Knight was review bombed. It was just reviewed super harshly. And I'm not saying at all that Arkham Knight was review bombed. I'm simply using Arkham Knight as an example of a game that was ripped apart by people at launch and then made a comeback. I'm using it as an example that a short period of time of really bad reviews will not make or break the overall user score or reputation of the game. Moving on.
And in fact, the more spontaneous and uncoordinated the review flooding is, the greater the perceived authenticity of the flooding may be, insofar as it is meant to be an expression of audience sentiment.
Yeah, if a lot of people do something on their own volition with no coordination, it's usually because something shady went down.
There are those who may flood the review page of a game after hearing about it on social media or a gaming news website.
Whoa, let's go back to those reviews again. Borderlands' biggest problem is that it's a loot game that actually overwhelms you with loot and then gives you a pitifully disorganized mess of an inventory system to deal with it all. Steampunk Alice in Wonderland on crack, bad, Just Play 2. It's obvious that this review page is of Borderlands, and this is following the Borderlands 3 announcement that the game would be an Epic Store exclusive and that Randy Pitchford also lied about the business model. So yes, you have these two that are, just copy-pasting the Epic terms of service, because that's the main reason people didn't want to buy the game. But then you also have 3 perfectly legitimate reviews of Borderlands. Again, not condoning or condemning review bombing, just saying whoever edited this video really needs to work on, showing the right things.
The entire purpose of user review bombing is to make a statement, to such a degree that this purpose ultimately overshadows the original purpose of a review being the critical evaluation of a game.
Not necessarily. Review bombing is not meant to overwhelm the actual reviews, but rather to make it very obvious that there's something shady going on behind the scenes of the game. If people want to see legitimate reviews, they usually go to critics. If people want to see what the users are thinking, they go to the user score. And what do you know? That's where review bombing happens.
Reviews are supposed to be critical evaluations of any piece of media, and it could be the case, for example, that one game is generally perceived to be great, but has consumer-unfriendly DLC practices, which could still result in a decently positive average of review scores.
Which is perfectly legitimate grounds for criticism, by the way. The modern gaming industry is full of microtransactions and DLCs and shady business models. So yeah, if a game is good, generally, but has a really shady business model, yeah, criticize it. Do that.
A professional review may make statements in their reviews, whether reflecting their personal beliefs or not, but the fundamental purpose of a review is to be critical of a game first and foremost, even if reviews are fundamentally part opinion-based.
I don't like where this is going.
Professional reviews must express a sense of authenticity and fairness to the craft of game reviewing, and a sense of respect and trust to the audience.
Professional reviews need to do that.
The fundamental question of a review of critical evaluation is why, and a person's review is supposed to be filled with proper justifications of why they evaluate a game to be good or bad based on a variety of highlighted facets.
Yes, you're describing reviews.
Decisions have to be explained in honesty and in fairness. That being said, professional reviewers' own evaluations can be used to affect change or to prompt developers or publishers to take notice, even if they are not a part of a user review bombing movement. After all, user reviews bombing is just meant to make a statement for other game players, members of gaming media, and for other game industry developers or publishers to take notice.
Well, that right there is actually one of the reasons why review bombing, moral or immoral, is kind of important and should stay here. Again, for like the 7th time in this video, not condoning or condemning review bombing. I judge review bombs on a case-by-case basis, as we all should. However, to say overall review bombing is bad is disingenuous because of what you just described here. There's a big difference between the way a professional critic, will look at a game versus the way that the average player will look at a game. Or just the massive gaming population will look at a game. There are games with huge disconnects between the professional critics and the gamers. Because professional critics tend to be more forgiving of things like DLC practices, grind walls, repetitive gameplay, overly cinematic things that just take away from the actual game. Critics tend to be more forgiving of those things, while gamers are not, because we're the ones that they take advantage of. So if a game has some really shady practices, or if it's really not, seen as a very good game, but critics are just going on about how it's fine, it's good, go buy it, it's fine. Or worse, if critics are being bought out by publishers, which does happen, well then the gaming population is often going to try and balance that out with bad user reviews, consciously or unconsciously. Again, that's why Metacritic and Rotten Tomatoes, why did I say Rotten Tomatoes? The fuck? That's why they separate critic reviews and audience reviews. Because it's important to show the difference there.
Whether they be the developers of the game being reviewed, or for developers of other games, so that they will take notice and avoid the backlash being heaped upon that particular bombed game when they work on their own titles.
That's an interesting point, but it's also still accurate. When people review bombed Borderlands because of the Borderlands 3 announcement, they weren't saying that Borderlands was a bad game. They were just trying to get the word out that this was the game people wanted and this was the game that people supported, but they're not going to support the new one on a different platform for whatever reason. In your own words, it's there to make a statement.
Thus far, this video has spent a decent amount of time.
Wait, what the hang on. Play that little section again.
Thus far, this video has spent a decent amount of
Why did you show a 1-second clip of Battlefront before switching to a different Battlefront? Seriously, who edited this?
Thus far, this video has spent a decent amount of time spent talking about authenticity. One fundamental issue with user review bombing can lie with the problem of evaluating authenticity. It's not likely going to be the case that a mass gathering of players are going to flood game review pages out of boredom.
Debatable.
They may do so to make a statement about one aspect of a game that they do not like, but it's rare that players will band together simply to tank the review average of a game.
That's very true. Gamers aren't just gonna go and shit on a game for no reason.
We generally assume that, even if it's not outwardly expressed, when it comes to user review bombing, it's happening for a reason. Something in the game is prompting that sort of reaction from players. But what may come across as inauthentic is the general consensus on the quality of the game itself. While it can be the case that many people don't like one game's DLC practices or story writing, it's not always clear to the degree to which that these concerns reflect a serious issue with most people playing a particular game.
I get what they're saying here, and that's why this video is kind of weird. A group of people review bombing a game, it's possible they're not correct, for lack of a better word, Because a lot of these things are opinionated. I could say, fuck loot boxes. I hate loot boxes. They're predatory. They take away from legitimate progression systems and better business models. But you could say, I'm fine with loot boxes. I think they're fine. Neither of us is wrong, Sure, you could say I'm correct that they're predatory and that they take away from a better system. I truly believe that to be true. But whether or not they're good or bad is subjective, and that's why review bombs are interesting. That's why this video is kind of weird, and I felt the need to talk about it.
In that sense, a problem with negative review flooding is that it sort of distorts the real, non-professional average evaluation of a game.
No. Absolutely not. No, it does not. I showed the screenshots of Arkham Knight, how that has not changed it. And also with Borderlands, the game that you've been talking about. You go to the reviews now, it's overwhelmingly positive with a little pop-up that says the product has experienced one or more periods of off-topic review activity, which is something that Steam does now. If Steam detects that a game is being review bombed, it will save the reviews and make note of the reviews to make it clear to the person looking at the game that the game has been review bombed, which obviously will prompt the user to go look into why it was review bombed, but it won't take those reviews into account. While I personally don't agree with this system, I think this system is going to be really easy to be exploited in the future. This feature's been in place since before this video was published. Review bombs will not distort the score of a game, or at least not on Steam, they won't. So let's go to Metacritic then. Metacritic is kind of weird for a situation like this, because people don't really go to Metacritic after launch like they do to Steam. So yes, the user score is ugly for Arkham Knight on PC because of the launch, but if you go to sort the reviews by date, the reviews are much more understandable and much more honest. You got 8s, 9s, 10s, a couple 3s and 5s in there for perfectly legitimate reasons, because let's be honest, Arkham Knight wasn't that good of a game compared to the last ones. But you see what I'm getting at here. How about Borderlands? That's the one you're all butthurt about. Borderlands, 7.6 user score. Borderlands 2, 8.2 user score. So no, a review bomb won't make or break the overall user score of a game.
If someone visited the Metacritic page for a game and simply looked at the user score section for a game, such as Fallout 76, they may simply take that score at face value without understanding why the game received such a low score and avoid the game altogether.
First of all, debatable that would happen. Second of all, they probably wouldn't just look at the user score and go away. They would probably look at the user score and then look at the user reviews and see why the score was what it was. And third of all, Fallout 76's bad reviews were deserved. Fallout 76 wasn't review bombed. It was a game that got bad reviews. Big difference. However, once again, I'll say it just like I said it for Arkham Knight. If you go to the user reviews and sort by date, by most recent, you're seeing people get a lot more forgiving of the game because the game has improved. Now, I definitely don't agree with all these 10s, but the game's gotten better. And if the game continues on this path of improvement, yeah, you'll see that user score get much better in time.
Reflexively dismissing games with a score perceived to be too low, or only internalizing how well a game is scored rather than understanding why the score was received, is an issue with the practice of assigning grades or scores to a game in general.
Yeah, it's why people don't really do that. People don't look at a bad score and then just not look into why it got the score that it got. If I look at a game and it got a fuck ton of bad reviews, I'm going to look into why the game got bad reviews. I'm not going to just be like, well, that game got bad reviews. Goodbye, moving on with life.
But this is more of an issue in user review bombing because there are many more players out there compared to professional reviewers, and they can exert far more influence over a game's average player rating because of it.
And it should also be noted that despite the fact that there are far less critics than there are gamers, critics are the ones giving games 9s and 10s and 8.8s when they really don't deserve them. And those are the numbers that are going to be flaunted around in trailers and commercials and promo materials. Just pointing that out.
You might worry about whether or not any average score is real, but it's by design that averages should reflect the sentiment of many people.
Like they do.
While user reviews may be open to anybody who can use a computer, if there are any significant number of bad reviews rather than just 1 or 2 or any small number, it should invite someone to take pause, particularly if that person has an investment in seeing how people respond to a particular game.
Well, a couple things. First of all, Steam user reviews are not open to anyone who has a computer. They are only open to people who own and have played the game, which is why the person's playtime will show in their Steam review. And as for the other part about, people taking pause when seeing user reviews and review scores, yeah, that's what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to make you think about whether or not you want to support the game.
Whether they be a fan, or a developer, or publisher. In that sense, there's a beauty in the way that averages are used to express opinions. Speaking on the how of user review bombing, the crafting of those reviews doesn't usually work in practice in the same way that professional reviews do, in the sense that professional reviews are expected to reflect a certain level of quality or thoroughness, or else the reviewer cannot be paid for writing reviews.
I mean, that's very obviously not true. We have reviews coming out from professional critics all the time when they obviously didn't actually play the game entirely or understand it. So, go on, I guess.
User review bombing can comprise both lengthy, well-written reviews and brief, poorly written reviews, or reviews written with generally low effort.
Like IGN reviews.
In fact, it tends to be the case that user review bombing will feature reviews written with minimal effort, as the general purpose of the user review bombing is to make a statement and then monitor reception to that statement.
Oh, good. Okay, now your editor found some review bombing. Great, good job. Good job. About fucking time you found something that actually correlates to what's being said.
In this case, that the review is low effort, such that it's deliberately meant to represent a statement, you know what to expect from that review.
Okay, first of all, what's your problem with user reviews being low effort? They're user reviews. They're not supposed to be professional. There's a huge element that you're just missing here. I can review a game really quickly with not a whole lot of effort. Witcher 3. Amazing story, great world, annoying gameplay, absolutely beautiful, story makes up for the gameplay. That was a low effort review, but it told you pretty much everything you need to know about it. How about Division 2? Very repetitive gameplay, very repetitive mission design, extremely rewarding and satisfying progression system. I don't like looter shooters, but I enjoyed this one because I like progression-based games. How about that? That was a low-effort review. I would think that was kind of informative. If people want high-effort reviews, they'll go to the high-effort review people, the critics. If they want just general people talking about the game, they'll go to user reviews. And just because a review is low quality doesn't mean it's not honest.
It's not a high-quality, in-depth review. It's something primarily drawing attention to something that they dislike.
No, not at all.
We tend to expect differently of reviews that aren't part of floods. It's just something of a stereotype that reviews that are part of floods are low effort.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of high effort reviews that are part of floods, but you seem to think there's just no way a low effort review can be informative, so I don't know why I'm even trying to change your mind with that.
But it should be said that one of the key aspects of user review bombing is that besides issuing a negative score, the review should at minimum draw attention to the issue that the person making the review finds reprehensible.
Yes, there you go. There's the point. Congratulations. Moving on.
What would be the point of flooding the review page of a game without giving any sort of reason as to why it's being done? It won't encourage any effective action or notice from gaming media or the gaming industry, because they will see the negative flood of reviews as occurring for no reason.
And now your editor is back to showing perfectly legitimate negative reviews and calling them review bombing. Yay, I love bad editors. Look at these are reviews for Anthem. Anthem is not ready for market. Everyone told them, but EA put out another unfinished game. There's potential here, but it's not the cash cow EA are looking for in this current state, so they'll probably sack BioWare and abort this game. Quality seems impossible for EA when greed is the driving force. Low effort review, perfectly factual and legitimate. A lot of games are hard to review. Anthem isn't one of them. It's easy to identify its strengths, and it has excellent graphical fidelity and wonderful flight mechanics, and even easier to identify the many flaws. Perfectly legitimate review. This is not review bombing, this is a legitimate negative review. Learn the fucking difference, GamingBolt. Oh my god.
And that concludes our video on user review bombing.
Oh, great. So you're just gonna close. Oh my god. That actually makes me so mad. It's, I hate this current trend online from, like, mainstream news and gaming news sources that just, like, people are saying something I don't like. I'm gonna lump them in with this group of people that are less legitimate. Ugh, I hate it. You see it everywhere, and I fucking hate it. And also, what's the deal with GamingBolt having 820,000 subs, but this video was uploaded 3 weeks ago and doesn't even have 5,000 views? The fuck is that about? I do not just generally approve or disapprove of review bombing. I think different cases have different, amounts of legitimacy to them. But this video was very obviously meant to push you away from thinking review bombing is okay. I think review bombing should be judged on a case-by-case basis, but for that exact reason, I also believe it should be completely allowed. If you want legitimate reviews, go to critics. Go to people you trust. If you want to see what general gamers and the average gamer is talking about, you go to user reviews, and that's where you're going to see review bombing, that's where you're going to see people talking about shady business practices, that's where you're going to see people talking about the gameplay aspects that critics don't really talk about. There's nothing inherently wrong with review bombing. Now, are there cases where games get review bombed for reasons that I don't really agree with? Yeah, absolutely there are. But I'm not going to say review bombing as a whole should be stopped, or review bombing as a whole is bad because of a game that I liked getting review bombed. That's happened before. Games I like have gotten review bombed. And you know what? I may not even agree with the reasons, but I completely respect the people's right to talk about it that way. This is what discussion is, GamingBolt. Don't be lumping in perfectly legitimate criticisms in with people who are just bombing a game for the sake of bombing it. And don't be saying people bombing a game is even a bad thing. Because some games are doing shady shit and they should be called out for it. Negative user reviews are not inherently review bombing. But in closing, there is a major difference between a game getting bad reviews from users and users review bombing a game. And it should also be noted that neither of those scenarios are inherently bad. It's just people sharing passionate opinions about a hobby we care about. Toodles.